When we are talking about aerospace architecture, the way I would define it is a theory and practice of designing and building inhabited environments in outer space. Then the next question would be, how does terrestrial architecture relate to aerospace architecture? Well, terrestrial architecture, I would say, is a specialized subset of aerospace architecture. And the reason I say it is we often forget that all of us, we actually live on a spaceship called Earth. We often forget we are in space, orbiting around the sun. And we have evolved a way to build and survive on this planet. So aerospace architecture is essentially an extension of what we are already practicing here on Earth. And it's really nice to be in Mumbai to talk about moon bases. I was reading a review of a recent book by Susmita Mohanty called Maximum Cities. And Mumbai, like Tokyo, Sao Paulo, New York, is one of the densest cities on the planet. Apparently, we have about 17,000 people per square mile. That's the kind of human density we are talking about when we go about designing spaceships. So there is a very direct link between what we do here on Earth and what we are trying to design in order to live in extreme environments in outer space. If we were to study the psychological and sociological implications of the lives of people who live here in Mumbai in very small houses, there are things we could learn that we could apply to our long-duration missions when we go and live on the moon, even when we live in orbit for months at a time. Well, now since the presentation is up, I'll be presenting a few selected case studies of advanced concepts for moon bases. And the reason I've used the word new genre in my presentation is because I belong to a new generation of architects, designers, and engineers who refuse to do things the old way, who refuse to do things like the way it has been done for the last 4.5 decades by government space agencies such as NASA, the European Space Agency, the Russian Space Agency. The reason is, me and my colleagues from several different countries, we think that we need to find new ways of doing things. We need to beat bureaucracies. We need to beat the way government space agencies feed into monopolistic mega aerospace corporations who have very little incentive to go back and innovate. All they need to do is go back to old drawings, rehash them, and build. We will see that in the presentation as we go along. Most of you might remember, we had the Columbia Space Shuttle disaster in 2003 in February. And next February it will be 3 years. And the only launch we've had of the Space Shuttle was this year. It's just a small example of how big government bureaucracies fall apart when it comes to building things efficiently, running things efficiently. So I think the new genre is trying to do things differently, and that's what I'm here to present to you guys. I used to work at, I worked briefly at the NASA the Johnson Space Center in Houston. I worked for 2.5 years for the Boeing company. And then I went on to start my own consulting firm, a small aerospace consulting firm in San Francisco called Moonfront in 2001. And in 2003, we set up another small consultancy in Vienna, in Austria. And I'll be talking about some of the projects I've done through these companies of mine. Last year, in 2004, I led a theoretical research project in space architecture, where the idea behind the project was to identify and recognize the contributions made to aerospace architecture, not just by government agencies, but people outside that traditional domain of government agencies. So the first genre we decided is, we decided to call it Voyage d'Esprit. It is a genre derived from science fiction books and films. And for those of you who are cinephiles out there, films such as 2001 by Stanley Kubrick, or the Russian film Solaris, or for that matter, some of the modern ones like Blade Runner or Gattaca. A lot of these films have been an inspiration for space architects. And they have made a very valuable contribution, whether it's Jules Verne writing about From the Earth to the Moon, or Arthur Clarke writing his books. They have made a significant contribution, and that we think is the first genre. The second genre is what we call the man-in-a-can genre. And that's the genre which, the timeline we say is in 1961 when we first launched the first human into space, Yuri Gagarin. And the architecture of this genre is largely constrained by the shape of our cylindrical bay of the rocket in which we launch our habitat. And a lot of the hardware that comes from this genre is derived from military hardware, because there's a very close connection between the aerospace industry and the defense industry. So a lot of these habitats that you see are derivatives of hardware from submarines, from fighter aircraft, and the style, the design grammar, the materials are often derivatives of those hardware. And the source of the work for this genre is mostly engineers working in these government agencies. These are images of the very early spacecraft. That's Mercury, and that's Vostok. And the reason we decided to call it the man-in-a-can is we haven't moved much. We haven't moved beyond the tin can architecture of the 1960s, and it's about time that people like you and me, decide to do things differently. The next image that you're about to see is a rendering from NASA about what the habitats might look like when we go to Mars. And as you can see, we are still constrained or limited to those four-can architectures. And that's why we decided that some of us young people should get together and bring in the advancements, the latest advancements in material technologies and deployment technologies, creative construction geometry, prototyping techniques, modeling techniques, and bring it to our future habitats. The third genre to which I belong and to which this presentation belongs is called transgravity. And the philosophy behind this genre is that we cannot draw a line between Earth and space. What is important is for us to recognize the Earth-space continuum and extend our practice here on Earth to destinations off the planet. And the source of the ideas in this genre come from architects, engineers, designers who work outside the traditional domain of government agencies in collaboration with many other disciplines, psychologists, sociologists, ergonomists, human factor experts, life support system experts, and so on. The basic difference between the design approach of the second genre and the third genre is the second genre has been largely dominated by engineers. It's been very engineering-centric. So what we've done is we've ended up building safe pressure vessels as opposed to real habitats for people to live in. I'll show you some pictures and you'll see what I mean. The third genre is saying that we need to bring the human back into the picture. We cannot, for the second genre, when you start designing a habitat, the first tier parameters are usually your mission parameters and your technical parameters. Whereas what we are saying as a third genre is we need to bring in the human dimension ground up, right from the conceptual design phase.